There's a church about 20 miles outside the small town of Dunlow, hidden at the edge of a dying forest. Locals call it St. Amos, but it hasn't had a congregation in over 40 years. No priest, no visitors, just stone silence. And secrets, if you ask about it. The older folks will either go quiet or tell you never to go near it. But of course, someone always does. It started with a dare, like these things always do. 3 friends, Jonah, Chris, and Olivia, high school seniors, bored out of their minds on a rainy Friday night. Chris had heard about the church from his grandfather, who warned him it was cursed. Said he once saw a man standing at the pulpit long after the church had been abandoned, face pale, mouth moving, though there was no sound. Naturally, that made it the perfect place to explore. So they drove out there around midnight, flashlight batteries barely holding, phones charged just enough to record for their socials. The gravel road was overgrown, the gate rusted shut, but they climbed it easily. St. Amos stood tall, swallowed by vines, its stained glass windows cracked like frozen spiderwebs. It looked dead, but when they stepped inside, the air was warm, too warm. There was a scent, too, not dust, not mold, something else, like burned incense mixed with copper. Olivia was the first to notice the whispering, faint at first, like wind through the rafters, then clearer, voices, praying. But the church was empty. They moved down the aisle, passing broken pews and melted candles that looked freshly burned. On the pulpit lay an open Bible, but the words had been blacked out with ink. Only one phrase remained visible, circled in red: "He who listens will be chosen." Jonah laughed, said it was all a prank, maybe a squatter messing with them. Then the organ played, 3 deep notes, low and hollow, shaking the dust from the walls. No one was near the keys. Chris whispered, "Did you hear that?" But Olivia wasn't listening anymore. She was staring up at the choir loft. A figure stood there, thin, in a rotted black robe, face hidden by shadow. It raised one hand and pointed at Jonah. The whispering grew louder, overlapping voices speaking in a language none of them understood. Jonah screamed and ran for the exit, but the heavy wooden doors slammed shut before he could reach them. Then the candles lit themselves, every one of them, dozens of flames lining the walls, casting dancing shadows that moved on their own. Chris tried to pry the doors open. Olivia fell to her knees, sobbing, covering her ears. Jonah just stood still as the whispers entered him. His eyes rolled back. He began speaking in tongues, mouth stretching wider than it should. Blood trickled from his nose. Then he turned and smiled, but it wasn't Jonah's smile. It was too wide, too knowing. He walked calmly up the aisle toward the pulpit, stepped behind it, and continued the sermon. Only it wasn't in English. Chris and Olivia backed away, but they couldn't leave. The doors wouldn't open. The windows wouldn't break. And then the pews began to fill. Shadowy shapes, dozens of them, people with no faces, seated like a congregation, all of them watching, listening. Jonah raised his hand and pointed at Chris. Chris began to float, screaming as invisible hands dragged him toward the altar. Olivia tried to stop it, but she couldn't move. Her limbs locked in place, as if something was inside her, holding her still. Then everything went dark. Olivia woke up outside the church just before sunrise, curled up at the edge of the forest, her clothes soaked in blood. Not hers. She was alone. The church was gone. Not destroyed. Just gone. Only the stone foundation remained, blackened as if by fire. She doesn't speak much anymore, but she draws dozens of drawings of pews filled with faceless people, of an organ playing itself, of her friends' screams, and always the phrase from the Bible, "He who listens will be chosen." If you go near the site today, you might hear the wind, or maybe something else, a voice, low, distant, preaching in a tongue not meant for human ears. If you hear it, don't listen, because if you do, you might be next.